Hey everybody, Roland Frasier here, and I'm answering today a question of why is creativity so important in business? Why is creativity so important in business? We're going to answer several questions around that. The very first one that I want to talk about is what does it actually mean to be creative in business? And this is kind of cool because I had, a few years ago when didn't have my own personal website forever. And I finally decided to put one together a few years ago. And I hired a company called Influix to do it. And the guy, Dmitry Kozlov, who was absolutely brilliant. I met with him and we sat down and we started asking me questions and he's like, okay, I see the colors of the website. I'm like, how do you see the colors of the website from having a conversation? But he did, and it was very impressive. And the colors that he picked, if you go to rolandfrasier.com, you can see what he built. And I thought he did a great job. And one part of the process was identifying your origin story. And I was like, it sounds kind of bogus to me. And he's like, no, you got to get this guy to do it. And this guy named Patrick Coombs, who he recommended. It was not inexpensive to have a conversation with Patrick, but he was going to help me figure out my origin story. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to trust the process. So I trusted the process and it was absolutely fantastic. We had a couple of conversations and then he came back and he said, what I see is that you're 50% business and 50% creative. And I have a creative background as a musician and as a writer and an author and a creator in lots of different areas, composer, right? All of those things, where I found that what I did creating things from nothing actually really helped me in business because it helped me approach things in a way that was not the traditional way. And so when you say, what does it mean to be creative in business? I think what it means is that you're aware of the traditional scenario, the traditional players, and the traditional solutions that are being offered in any particular business situation. But you have the ability to access areas of your mind that will give you new and different ways to approach those situations. And really, I think to me, it's just the fact that you are aware that there are traditional ways of doing things and that they might not be the most efficient or effective, right? How efficient is something is how quickly can you get it done, right? Pretty much. Effectively is how able are you to get the thing done that you want to get done? You might be efficient because you can do it quickly, but it turns out like a mess. Or it might be very effective because it gets done perfectly, but it's inefficient because it takes you too long to do it. When you can get efficiency and effectiveness all at the same time, bingo, right? So being creative in business to me is that when you come in, you want to come in with a beginner's mind. You want to come in and understand and ask questions before you come to any conclusions. And you want to say, okay, how is it that you guys are doing things right now? And listen to that. And as you're listening, take note, but don't hang on to any of the things that you think that they've said that maybe are wrong or they could do different. Just let all the information wash over you. And then to be creative is to say, what if we assume that these were not the way that these things were done? What if they were done differently? Is there any way that we might do this differently? Let's just brainstorm a whole bunch of stuff. And so what you're doing is you're bringing your mind in a beginner's mind, if you're a Zen person, or an open-minded, not already full fashion, and you don't accept that these are the ways that things are done. And you don't accept that these are the people who need to do them, or that these are the roles that these people need to have, or even that this is the best result, or that this is the right client. And then you say, okay, with all of these little Lego broken down building block pieces, how could I reassemble this in different ways that would get the result that we desire, but maybe using different people, or maybe having these people that we have doing things differently in terms of a process, or maybe with different resources that don't exist now? Or is there a way to facilitate a faster accomplishment of this using some set of tools that we may or may not have? And if we don't have them, maybe we could develop them. It's just bringing that not committed to doing it the way it's being done, and an awareness that there's very, very probably, not just possibly, but very, very probably a solution that is better than the one that's there. And having that creativity, I think having that attitude or that approach is how you are able to be creative in business. Okay, the next question that I get a lot is, what are the benefits of being creative in business? Well, my gosh, I think there's so many. And the very first one is that it makes it fun. It makes it fun. Like, if you are a creative person, or just like most humans, the idea of having an assembly line where you take part A and put it on part B over and over and over all day as an endless stream of parts come by you, and you're supposed to do the same thing over and over and over, that is the antithesis of creativity, and the boringest life that I could ever imagine spending in business. So one of the benefits of creativity is that you get to bring your personality and your thought process, and you get to gamify this puzzle of how can I solve for whatever challenge I'm facing, or even if it's just how can I improve this thing that I'm doing? What if I didn't need a human, for example, to take part A and put it on part B on that assembly line all day long over and over? What if I could get a little robot that would do that, right? Or what if we assembled or arranged things differently so that part A dropped on part B, and we just have to change our manufacturing line? Or what if we could manufacture part A with part B already on it in the mold? There's all these things that I think just becomes so much more fun and interesting. So I think from an engagement standpoint of yourself and the people that you work with, or that work for you, or that you work for, there's just a human interest, much more engaged kind of thing that comes from being able to be creative. The other thing that happens is innovations that improve effectiveness and efficiency in the business, right? So the innovations of how can we create a better product? How can we serve our customers better? How can we make our employees happier? How can we make our shareholders more money? All of these things. How can we create a better world? Comes from being creative. So a huge benefit to everyone. Being creative creates improvement. It creates innovation, and it creates advancement and evolution so that we all get better served in the process. And I think, to me, those are huge, huge, huge benefits. And I can't think of how dull the world would be if we didn't have creativity applied, if that was like somehow filtered out and we were always on that assembly line. Think about how we've come in manufacturing from the innovation itself of the assembly line, which made manufacturing crazy more efficient, but horribly more boring. And then Toyota coming up with the Toyota way and saying, well, we can actually increase performance dramatically by relying on the observation of the workers. This is creativity applied to a non-creative kind of process, right? A manufacturing line. You can actually bring creativity to a non-creative thing, or to a thing that's kind of tried to suck the creativity out of everything, and it still improves, right? Because nobody was ever able before that to do all the things that Toyota was able to do with the Toyota manufacturing system. So it's just kind of impossible to suck the creativity out of everything and still end up with something that's going to evolve. If you aren't creative, somebody else is gonna be. If you aren't evolving, someone else is, and you will ultimately be outcompeted. And that's a huge benefit, is that creativity truly enables you to survive and to thrive. So another question that you hear a lot is, how can I encourage and increase my creativity? And that's kind of cool because it's been something that's been very interesting to me throughout my life. And there's a guy named Edward de Bono who has a whole bunch of books on creativity. There was a art book or a thinking book several years ago called Drawing on the Left Side of the Brain, which was designed to get us to be full brain people. And I think one of the things in terms of like, what are some of the things that you can do to encourage creativity? Number one is you can encourage creativity. You can tell your coworkers and your employees and your bosses and your partners and your friends, hey, I really would appreciate if you think of new, better, or different ways to do the things that I'm doing. I would appreciate it if you would share those with me. And then when they do share, don't be defensive and say, oh, that will never work because of blah. It's the stupidest idea I ever heard. Actually praising the people who are giving you this input and this innovation and these ideas is priceless, right? Because we all want to be praised. And so if you punish people for bringing innovative things to you and creative things and trying to introduce this creativity into anything that you do, you will absolutely stomp it out, and you don't want to do that. So how can you think about causing people to want to be creative? Tell them, and then encourage them, and then reward them when they do. And this could be through a formal process where if there are efficiencies that are brought into a manufacturing process, or increased customer satisfaction, or fewer injuries, or any of these things that improve the business in any way, it makes more profit, that you give rewards for that. That would be like a systematized creativity encouraging system, right? But as far as how you can increase creativity, I think it's just the approach. It's an awareness that you can always do things better. It's an awareness that there may be 10 different ways to accomplish the same thing, and you only have uncovered one of those things, and you need to uncover the others and search for those, because one or more of those may be significantly better than the thing or the way that you're doing things now. And that alone should really incentivize creativity. You could also do research and participate in creativity enhancing exercises. The brain is like a muscle, right? The more that you use it, the better it gets. Creativity, I think, is like a muscle too. The more that you encourage it and the more that you engage in creative things, creative thinking, creative writing, participating in creative hobbies, all of these things where you can help maintain the plasticity of your brain and encourage new neural pathways, so that those pathways might be something that the thing that you've done the same way for 100 years runs down and triggers something, and you're like, oh my gosh, I could do it this way. Talking to other people who are creative, hanging around with people who think differently, having a diverse workforce, ethnically, racially, and gender-wise, and socioeconomic class-wise, politically. Be open to hearing new ideas, and always be thinking of, how does this relate to the ideas that I have? How does this relate to the beliefs that I hold? How can I challenge the beliefs that I hold? How can I encourage other people to challenge my beliefs? And how can I reward those people when we have positive dialogues about how to do things differently? All of that goes into encouraging creativity. And I think that you'll find that if you start doing some of those things, even if it's like, I've never played an instrument, okay, well, start learning guitar or piano, because it'll cause you to draw on different centers of your brain. And those centers that haven't been activated or active before start churning, and then they'll be processing the things that you think about as well. Also, taking time to allow your subconscious to process challenges that your conscious is trying to solve is a fantastic way to get problem solved. If you've ever experienced thinking about any kind of challenge or problem that you were trying to solve, and then you went to bed and you woke up the next day and you're like, I've got it, because you weren't thinking about it consciously. You gave it to your subconscious to run and work, and it happened, and you solved it. This is something that Salvador Dali and also Nikola Tesla did. I think it was Tesla that would sit in a chair with a couple of marbles and wait until he almost had drifted off to sleep. and they were held over a metal plate. And just as he was drifting off to sleep, they would fall, so it would wake him up again. And he was trying to stay always in, when he was thinking like this, always in that twilight of subconsciousness. And he would find that he would start thinking consciously about a problem and then start to fall asleep, turn it over to his subconscious. He would fall asleep, drop the marbles, wake up, and either have a solution or go through that process again. So any of those are things that you might use to help yourself trigger your creativity. So another question we get is, what does creativity look like in different aspects of a business? So I think here we would just break down the different areas of business and say, okay, and talk maybe about applications. So let's start with finance. That can be good or bad. I'm not sure how creative you want your finance people to be in terms of reporting on the accounting statements, because I know Enron and several other companies tried doing that, and it turned out that it got them into a lot of trouble, and a lot of people lost a lot of money, and some people even went to jail. So you want to be careful in business how creative you're getting. I will say that anytime that you are dealing with legal or compliance issues, creativity to circumvent those issues, and particularly the public purpose behind those, is a bad thing, and it's going to cause you some challenges. Even though you might be right, they own jails and they own armies, and it's just not good to mess with people that have those things. So let's go to creative finance used in a good way. One of the ways that you could do it is how we buy businesses. So I love to acquire businesses. I've been doing it for years and years and years now, and I've gotten to the point where I don't really like to have to come out of pocket with any cash to do that. Now, that's different from a no money down situation where you're saying, well, I'm going to do this and I'm not going to give any money. It's just that there's a lot of places, about 219 of them that I've identified, that you can find money that's not yours. It's not your money, it's not your credit, and you can still use that to have companies literally pay for themselves. So I think when you're thinking about different aspects of business and finance in particular, how can I use creative thinking to pay for or fund acquisitions of companies or assets that I want or need in my business without having to have the funds? That's pretty fun to do and exciting. And real estate is like that too. The first time that somebody signs their house over to you, their title, and you gave them no money for that, it's shocking. You're in kind of a disbelief as it's happening at the closing table, but yet it's happening, and now you own the house and you didn't pay any cash for it. It was a no money out of pocket deal. And so doing that in real estate and in business has helped me see that there are really a lot of ways that I can go about doing this. And so one of the exercises that I find to be very helpful is a version of the 5 whys, but it's the 5 buys. It's like, if I'm going to buy something, how do I do, what's the first way I would do it? Well, I do it with cash. Okay. What's the second way I do it? Well, maybe seller financing, or maybe a bank loan. Okay. What's the third way I could do it if I couldn't get the bank loan and I didn't have the cash? Well, maybe I'd see if the seller would be willing to finance that. Maybe the seller says no. So what's a fourth way that I might do that? Well, there might be some assets that are hidden in the business that I could use to acquire. And I just go through 5 times saying, well, what if that didn't work? I mean, what if I couldn't do that? What if I didn't have access to that? And it kind of makes the easy things that are sometimes the most expensive or the hardest to do, or the most time consuming. It rules those things out and makes you dig deeper into your subconscious to come up with solutions that are different than the norm. And that creates creativity. It creates solutions that you wouldn't have thought of. So anytime you're thinking about the finance side, I would say, well, what if I couldn't do it that way? How would I do it? What if I couldn't do it that way? And I think then we go over to marketing and we say, okay, and we actually call it creative, like the ad campaigns that you see that have pictures and text or videos, that's called creative in the industry. So how do I get creative with my creative? Well, one of the best ways is to apply a scientific creativity hybrid process, where you first say, what's the data? What's the data on how these different things are performing? Because there's a lot of data that's out there. So you might look at 5 different ads, and you might see data on how each of those ads performed, and then say, well, what if I took the best elements from each of those things and applied them in different combinations. Or let's say there's 5 elements to each ad. There's an image, there's a headline, there's an offer or a call to action, there's some text, and there's a website. There's 5 things. Well, what we might do is test each of those elements against other ads that have different elements, and then find out the best of each of those 5 elements and then combine them. And so that would be a systematized creativity that would then perhaps lead us to think about, okay, well, now we know the 5 things that work the best in this particular ad. What are other things that could potentially work? And then we just go into a brainstorming session and figure out how can we come up with 100 subject lines, 100 headlines, 100 different images that we might use, and then you're going to test all of those, and that's an application of creativity using data science and performance, and then testing and validation. And that's super, super powerful, right? Super powerful. That's what we do in our businesses when we're trying to figure out what is going to get the best response. If you get to human resources or people in the business and say, how can I be creative there? I think there the key is that you're going for diversity, equity, and inclusion. You're saying, how can I get people who have diverse backgrounds, ethnicities, experiences, people from different genders, people from different locations in the world, and bring those people together to get all of their perspectives, because they're going to be people that think completely different from us. If we surround ourselves with people who think like us, we will get groupthink and we'll stagnate. But somebody from India and somebody from Africa and somebody from South America and somebody from Europe and somebody from the United States, and each of them is a different ethnicity and each is a different gender or gender identity, and you bring those people in and they've each got different experiences and they come from different social strata, different financial backgrounds, they're going to bring a huge variety, a huge array of different thoughts to the business, which is going to result in a tremendous influx of creativity, because each of them will be playing off of each other, and you'll end up with so many more options. So I think in the human side, that's really important. Then you get to operations. Operations creativity is going to be, okay, well, what are all the different ways that we could do this? What are the ways that we do this now? And what are the places that waste exists? And what are the constraints that we have that we face right now? And if we had to overcome and approach a mechanism for getting past these constraints or reducing them or just blowing them away, what would that be? And what would it look like if that constraint didn't exist? And what if we weren't constrained by dollars in solving the solution? And then thinking that way brings to that manufacturing or operational or service process a whole host of new ideas on how you could do those things. And that creates huge benefit. Sales, similar, right? What about testing all different types of approaches to selling? What about testing all of our different offers? What about having different people who are acting as sales? What about direct sales versus indirect sales, outbound versus inbound? What about using people who set appointments and then follow up with sales? What about sales via chatbots? What about sales via email? What about sales via Zoom? All of the different things that we could do to create a different sales experience for our customer in a way that would be continually monitoring and measuring that by seeing what is the customer satisfaction and engagement level at each point. What's the customer happiness that we're delivering? What is the employee happiness that we're delivering, that we're monitoring using employee net promoter score and things like that? That is a really great way to apply creativity to operations, to sales, to marketing, to finance, and any other aspect of the business. So I think just being aware of all of these things can have a tremendous positive impact on your company. The last question I want to talk about with respect to creativity is, how does creativity help businesses grow? So businesses are going to ultimately stagnate with no creativity. And I'll go through a few different things. The first is that the world is always changing around us. people are always evolving or devolving, but there's change no matter what. And there are changes in culture, there's changes in economic circumstances as economies rise and fall. There's changes in attitudes as things become more restrictive and more open. Just throughout history, we as humans are constantly changing. So if you're in business, you are either selling a product or a service. And if you're selling a product or service and you're ignorant of the changes that are going on around you, then you're not going to be able to sell more, and you're ultimately going to have more competitors that come in and take your business away. So not to confuse creativity with change, but creativity is necessary, innovativeness is necessary, because there is always change. And so we have to be aware of the nature of the change that is going on, and then apply creativity to find solutions that will better serve our changing customer demographic and psychographic, right? The people that are purchasing our products or services, we're going to have to get creative and say, we need to adapt, and we need to figure out what is the best type of adaptation for our product or service to serve this changed demand, this changed market, to create more demand, right? The definition of like creativity, create demand. So if you're thinking about like, how does this help business? It helps businesses to survive and thrive. It helps businesses to serve their customers better. It helps the employees of the business to be happier because they feel like they're contributing positively to a good customer experience. So creativity is going to be very important in just staying alive as a business. Beyond that, creativity in terms of innovation is also going to be important, because we're going to want to think about what are the things that might make our customers' lives better that we currently are not doing. And Steve Jobs did such a great job of this. And I think the iPad is a wonderful example, because I remember when the iPad, which I'm reading notes from one as I'm talking to you, when the iPad first came out, I was like, what the heck would I ever want one of those for? I've got my phone and I've got my laptop. This is kind of like neither. It's like a bad spork. And sporks get a terrible name, by the way. Sporks can absolutely be good in certain situations. When one needs a spoon and a fork, a spork serves. And it turns out that the iPad has become one of the most valuable tools that I use as an electrical device, but none of us ever knew that we needed it until we had it. And so the creativity of a visionary like Steve Jobs saying, I know that this doesn't exist, and I know there's no current demand for it, but I'll bet you if I made it happen that people would buy it. And obviously, with multiple hits from the iPod to the iPhone to the iPad to the iWatch and so on and so forth, the Apple Watch, so on and so forth, he's been right, created the most valuable company in the world. And that's a pretty big benefit that you can see from creativity, right? So I think creativity also keeps the change of creativity keeps everyone in the company challenged, and challenge creates engagement. Also, creativity creates change, which is difficult, and difficult times make people better. Difficult times make us find the parts of ourselves that we might not find if everything was always able to go on as it was. And it also just keeps life interesting generally. I think it increases your NPS, your eNPS, your shareholder value, your happiness level, your customer satisfaction, and your impact on the world. All of those are pretty positive things. And so those are the things that I think creativity adds to and helps with in business.
If you want a lot of additional really cool stuff, I've got a whole channel full of it, and you should subscribe so that you don't miss any of it, because I'm uploading videos all the time. There's a lot of things that are changing in this area, and you don't want to miss out. You don't want to do it wrong, and you don't want to make the mistakes I made. Subscribe so that you don't miss out, and then check out this next video.